Yo, 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 what is up, everybody? This is Caleb back again to teach you about extensions. Super duper cool. Let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and begin in Xcode. We're going to build a really simple app in this video that basically is going to teach you how you can use extensions in just one way. There's tons of different ways that you can use extensions, and I really do encourage you to dive in deeper and get to know more and more what they can do. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's build this out. So go ahead and click Create a New Xcode Project. And we're just going to build a simple single view app. I'm going to name this Extensions Dance Party because that sounds fun. Press next and let's save that. Boom. There you go. Let's make this full screen. Beautiful. And here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to start in the main storyboard. So go ahead and select main.storyboard. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put 3 UI buttons on the screen. So let's go ahead and type UI button, drag one on, and we're just going to make it a little bigger, like so, a little taller, a little shorter. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and set the background color to something pretty. Okay, how about this blue? That looks nice. And the font needs to be white. That looks great. Change the font. You know what I'm going to pick if you've seen any of my other videos where I do interface builder stuff. I love Avenir Next, so do that. I also like Demi Bold, and size 20 looks great. And you know what? We're not going to set a title on this button just yet, but we are going to go ahead and duplicate it twice. Okay, so duplicate it like so and make a stack of 3 buttons. And you know what? As these are currently in place, we don't actually have to do any constraints. We should, but we're not going to right now, just for time, because they'll actually stay in place because we don't have anything else that is screwing up where the interface builder thinks they are on the screen. So let's see, we're going to do 3 different extension functions, or I guess instance methods, for these UI buttons. Okay, we're going to make an extension of UI button, and we're going to enable these UI buttons to sort of have like superpowers or whatever. We're going to give them extra functionality that they don't normally have, which is the point of extensions. So this middle button is going to wiggle, so just go ahead and type wiggle for the description. This bottom button is going to dim. And this top button is going to colorize. You know what? The font's a little big. Let's bump it down to 18. Okay, super cool. So let's go ahead and let's set up some connections here for these with IB actions and IB outlets. So bump open the assistant editor. And it's going to be a little bit tight here, but that's fine. Let's squeeze that a little tighter there. Nice. And get rid of did receive memory warning. Get rid of that. And we're going to create an outlet and an action for each button. So go ahead and right click and drag from the colorize button and just name it colorize button. Okay, right click and drag from the wiggle button and go ahead and call it wiggle button. Kind of feels funny writing that, but anyway. Now right click and drag from the dim button and call it dim button. All right, there we go. Cool, so outlets are good. Let's create some actions now and get rid of that comment. I really wish you could set it up so that that's not even included, but you can't. At least that I know of. If you know how, send us a message and tell us how. But now let's go ahead and create some actions for each of these buttons. So right click and drag from the colorize button, change the connection to action and call it colorize, whoops, colorize button was pressed. Okay. Then beneath that, right click and drag from the wiggle button, change the connection to action and call wiggle button was pressed. Alrighty. And beneath that, finally, right click and drag from the dim button, change it to an action and call dim button was pressed. And we are now properly connected. So go ahead and close the assistant editor, pull open your view controller, and we have 3 connections here, IB outlets, and we have 3 IB actions as well. So let's go ahead and let's create our extension. Right click on the project folder and click new file. Create a Swift file like so, and we're going to call this UI button ext, short for extension. Okay, that's how the DevSlopes team does it, and that's how we're going to do it here. So we need to go ahead and create an extension of UI button. Okay, in the last video, I taught you how to create extensions, and we extended classes like string and int, but in this video, we're going to be extending UI button, which is, a part of UIKit. And that's actually why we're getting this undeclared type issue. Replace foundation with UIKit. UIKit has all the stuff foundation has and more, so that's great. Awesome. Now, like I said, we're going to create some animation functions that are going to give our button the ability to do some really cool things. The first function is going to be a function that will wiggle the button on the screen, and that would be a great interface for maybe like an error. If you put in the wrong password, the button could wiggle and it could, pop up an error message saying wrong password. So let's go ahead and let's write that function now. So go ahead and type func wiggle, and we're going to use a CA basic animation, part of core animation, just because it's really easy to repeat certain animations easily, and we can just add it to this button really easily. So go ahead and type let wiggle anim equals CA basic animation, and we're going to go ahead and instantiate it, but you'll notice there are a couple options here. We want to instantiate it with a key path, okay? And the key path we're going to be instantiating is the position, okay? The position of the button, because if you think about it, we're moving it back and forth, and that's the key path we need to modify. So go ahead and type position, okay? Sort of a little identifier there for what we're doing. And now we need to set up some of the properties for the wiggle animation. So go ahead and type wiggle anim, and we're going to set the duration, the amount of times that the animation will repeat, whether or not it will auto-reverse the animations, and then we're going to set kind of the to and from point for the animation so it knows where to go. So go ahead and type wiggle anim.duration, and we're going to do a very, very short duration, and we're going to do it a lot of times, so it looks like a quick little, almost like a stutter. So go ahead and type 0.05, okay, a very short amount of time. For the amount of times that it will be repeated, go ahead and type wiggle anim.repeat count and set that to be 5. So whatever animation we set, it's going to do it 5 times. Set wiggle anim.auto reverses to be true, okay? We want it to automatically reverse, so if it goes this way, we want it to automatically reverse the opposite way. Easy as that. And now we need to set the from and the to value. So where it goes from and where it goes to. And then we'll set the animation to begin. So type wiggle anim.from value. And we're going to set it to be equal to a CG point. So go ahead and type CG point. And we need to set an X and Y value of CG float. So we are basically going to take whatever the center of the button is, and we're going to move it 4 to the left, then 4 to the right, 4 to the left, 4 to the right, back and forth, and that'll be our animation. So in order to capture the value for this button, remember, in an extension, think of this extension as this could apply to any button, and so what we're actually going to do is we're going to capture a reference to self, okay? We're going to call self.center.x. Because remember, this button could be any instance of a button. So we're going to use self because it can apply to any button. And like I said, we're going to move over 4. So let's say minus 4.0. Now, we don't want to move it all on the y-axis, although we could. But for this, we're just going to say self.center.y. Okay, we're going to go from wherever it is on the y-axis, and we're not going to actually change that in the to value. It's going to be the same. So it's just going to stay on the y-axis where it is and move that way. So next, go ahead and call wiggle anim.to value, and we're going to set another CG point. It's basically going to be the opposite of this one. So go ahead and call CG point, and we need to instantiate it with some values, okay, for the X and Y. So like I said, call self.center.x, and this time we're going to plus 4.0. We're going to add 4.0, my mistake. And then for the Y value, we don't want to change it. So just call self.center.y, meaning whatever button this is applying to, we're going to take its Y value and we're not going to move it. Okay, it's going to stay the same. Now, in order to add this animation to our button and actually have it do its thing, we need to add it to the layer of the button. So to do that, we can just call layer.add animation. Okay, so the animation, of course, is wiggle anim, but what is the key? The key is actually our key path. So we can just go ahead and type position. And now our function is done. I think we should go try to add this to our button. and I think we should see how it does. So go ahead and enter the view controller, and on the wiggle button was pressed. Watch what we can do now. As you can see, it is type UI button, so we can call wiggle button, and our function .wiggle is right there. Super cool. So let's go ahead, let's build this to a simulator really quick, and let's go see if it worked. Okay, our simulator's opening up here in the back. Let's pull it up so we can see it. There we go. All right, so let's take a look. There's our button. Watch what happens when I click the wiggle button. You see that? It does our cool wiggle animation. Now, buttons do not normally do that. You could set this to happen in the instance of maybe logging in and maybe login failed. The button could wiggle upon an error. Super cool. Let's go set up our next two functions, dim and colorize. So go back into your UI button extension, and within that extension, we're going to write two more functions. Now, extensions don't only have to include one function. You can include many, many more. So let's go ahead and write the dim function now. Go ahead and type func dim. And what we're going to do inside this function is just basically do two animate with durations. So go ahead and type UI view dot animate with duration. Make sure to choose the one with a completion handler. Okay? We're going to make the duration 0.15, and the animations, we're going to take self, okay, so whatever button this is on, and we're going to get its alpha value and set it to be 0.75. Okay? So we're going to fade the button down a little bit, and then upon completion, we're going to fade it back up to 100%. So press enter and just set a name for the completion here, finished. And inside this completion handler, go ahead and make another UI view dot animate with duration, and we can do 0.15 again for a total of 0.3 seconds. That's usually a good time for the animation. And then the animations again, press enter, and we need to animate it back up to 100%. So call self.alpha and make it 1.0. Now, when we press the button, it should fade down and fade back up again. So let's go ahead and let's call this on dim button was pressed. Type dim button, and watch this. We have access to .dim. Now, it's not showing up yet. Sometimes, by the way, if it doesn't show up, you might need to build and run or just wait a second. So you'll see it's not showing up. And now if I call .dim, it does pop up. So sometimes you just have to build so that it gets a chance to look through everything and show you the right functions. So let's build and run. Let's go check this one out, and let's see how we did. All right, so tap on the wiggle button, it wiggles, tap on dim, and you see that it faded and popped back up. Really cool. I like it. Now, you can call any of these UI button extensions on any of these buttons. So I could call dim button.wiggle, and I could make it wiggle and dim at the same time, which is kind of cool. You don't have to. It's just up to you if you want. All right, let's go write the colorize function, which is really cool. And let's go back into UI button extension. Let's go ahead and write a function here. And you know what? Let me give you some more space to see. There we go. All right, so go ahead and type func colorize. And inside this function, we're going to create an array, okay? And it's going to be an array of 3 random numbers, and I'll show you why in a second. So let's just say let random number array equals an array of integer. Actually, not integer. We need it to be CG float, and you'll see why in a second. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to generate a random color. So go ahead and type let random color, color, and that's going to be equal to UI color. Now, the random color is going to be generated by generating 3 random numbers that we will fill in for the red, green, and blue values seen here for a UI color. So select red, green, blue. We can set the alpha to 1.0 because we don't want it to be transparent at all. But for each of these values, we need to divide them by 255. Okay, so do divided by 255 divided by 255. All right. Because 255 is like the top. That's like 100%, and anything below that is a certain value of color for red, green, and blue. Now, we're going to have 3 numbers in our array. So for the first number, we can call random number array, and we can pull out the first index at index 0. Next, we can go ahead and call random number array and pull out the second index at index 1. Then we can call random number array and we can pull out the index, the item at index 2 for number 3. Now, the reason that they're coming in as CG float are because if you looked at the UI color declaration, it requires a value of CG float. So we're just helping it out by putting in the right type. All right, so now that we have our random color generated, we need to go ahead and set the color to actually show up. So we're gonna do a nice little animation here to change the color. So go ahead and type UI view.animate with duration. Okay, go ahead and give it 0.3 seconds. And for the animation, we're gonna change the background color. So to access the background color of the button, we can call self.backgroundColor and set it to be random color. Just like that, and it'll fade to our next color. It's really, really cool. Now, the thing that we're having a problem with, though, is this is an empty array. We need to be able to generate 3 random numbers, but we don't yet have the ability to do that. So we're going to need to make a function that's going to generate 3 random numbers, but it doesn't quite fit into our UI button extension. So I'm just going to create a new Swift file, and I'm going to name it helpers. And this is where I'm just going to put a helper function that's going to generate the numbers we need. So go ahead and import UIKit, because we're also going to need it in this file. And go ahead and just call func generate 3 random numbers. And of course, this is a function, so we need curly braces. But let's think. Actually, that's not a very good function. I should make it so that I can pass in whatever quantity I want. Okay, so generate random numbers, quantity. I can tell how many I want. And then, of course, to return, we want to return an array of CG float, because if you remember, in our extension, that's what we need our array to be, CG float. So inside this function, go ahead and create an empty array of CG float, like so. Var random number array is equal to an array of CG float, and we're going to instantiate it from the beginning. Now, we've passed in a number for the quantity. So to do that, we can say for underscore in 1 all the way up. The 3 dots means all the way up to quantity, meaning if I said 3, we're going to go all the way from 1, 2 to 3, and all the way to the very end of 3 and stop there. And we're using an underscore here because we don't actually need to pass in like a value for I. We don't need to capture the value of the number because it's never going to be used. So we can just use an underscore to tell them we're not going to use the value, but we want to go through a for loop 3 times. So we're going to basically create a random number, append it to this array, and then at the end of the for loop, we're going to return the array of numbers. So go ahead and type let random number equals, and we can use a function in Swift, arc4random uniform. Now, you notice here that it says upper bound uint32. What we can do is we can set the highest value that it'll be allowed to go, and we're going to set that to be 255. Because all 3 values being 255 should be the highest. But you'll notice this is going to give us a problem. Arc4random uniform returns something called a uint32. That's a 32-bit unsigned integer, but we need it to be a CG float. So therefore, we're going to need to wrap this in parentheses and cast it as a CG float. So in Xcode 9, you can select the whole thing, create a parentheses, and then at the beginning, just type CG float. And it becomes a CG float. Really cool. Now, we need to append it to our random number array. So call random number array dot append, and we're going to go ahead and pass in the random number. So every time we go through 1, 2, 3, we append random numbers, and at the very end, we're going to return random number array. So super cool. This function will generate random numbers for us. Now let's go pass that in to our UI button extension. So go ahead and instead of calling an empty CG float here, go ahead and type generate random numbers, and we want to generate 3. 3 get returned, they get passed in here, a random number and color get generated, and it gets set to the background color of the button. So let's go try it out. Build and run, and pull open your simulator. Let's go see, oh, you know what? Wait a minute, button's not going to work. We did not set it in our view controller. There we go. So call colorize button dot colorize, there it is, and now build and run. Now we should be able to change the color and fade it nicely with a touch of a button. Let's try it out. Ooh, nice. Really cool. Do you see that? It's fading to the next color. We can wiggle buttons, we can dim buttons, we can do all kinds of amazing things thanks to extensions. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is video 2 of the 2-part series on extensions. There are so many more things you can do, guys, with extensions. So go dive into the documentation, go read more about it. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. So I really encourage you to do that. Thanks so much for watching this video, and let's head over to the next one.